So I don't know how many of you all enjoyed the Olympics and are sorry to see it over with. And you know, you can watch and enjoy swimming even when you're not a swimmer, which I'm not. I have this pool experience. Lisa loves swimming. She was actually quite a good swimmer, and she did the artistic swimming stuff by another name. And anyway, so she loves to swim. We go to pools sometimes. And I'm one of those guys who goes, ooh, that feels cold. Are any of you like that? You know, that feels cold, and you really don't want to just jump in. And you, little by little, go through this painful process of getting yourself in the pool. And then after a few minutes, like, it's great, it's fine. And then for some reason, you never learn to just jump in. And Peace Pursuit can be a little like that. It can be like, I'm not used to something like this. It's a little bit involved. There's all this prep to do in stage one. And I'm not used to it. And, you know, I'm just urging you to jump in, okay? Jump in when you get there. Jump in and go into the process. Stage one is meet with God. What could be better than that, okay? What could be better than hearing from the Lord about this relational problem that you want to resolve? So let's do a little bit of review of the last 3 weeks, and then we have just a touch of new stuff. And hopefully time for a few questions, but that we're probably going to ask you. Remember the main question here. Do you want to resolve a relational problem? It's not for resolving disagreements to necessarily create agreement, but it is intended to get two people who are in conflict and not relating well back to the place where they can relate again and move ahead before God, having resolved what needs to be resolved. Does anyone remember what we meant by the phrase bounce of peace? Do you remember what that point is that we call the bounce of peace, where the downward descent of a relationship stops, kind of planes out, and then has the ability to go up again? What happens at that point? Reconciliation is a one-word answer. Yeah, that's good. But how do we define reconciliation? Somebody said it? Yeah, appropriate confession and forgiveness. Appropriate mutual confession and forgiveness, because usually there's a offender and offended in all of us. Okay? Don't avoid conflict resolution. Jump in the pool. Okay? This is a how-to method, Peace Pursuit. It's not a difficult thing conceptually. The hard thing is actually jumping in the pool, but I already brought that up. We talked about roles. Anybody remember what an initiator is? One who starts what? Starts the reconciliation between two parties, of which the initiator is one? No. The initiator sees two other people who are not resolving a conflict, goes through their own stage one preparation, assists them to get together, or assists them to prepare, one of them in particular. Well, actually, they could ask somebody else to coach them. If he just gets someone to say, or she gets someone to say, yes, I want to resolve a relational problem, the initiating job is done. Okay? That's the initiator. I think we know what an offended person is, an offender is. What's a coach, or who's a coach? Right, a coach is someone who, again, is not part of, they're not part of the conflict, and they are assisting at least one of the parties, well, to approach the other, but to prepare. Because we'll get to this in a minute. But the coach's role is to help a person go through stage one preparation well. Stage one is what a person does alone before the Lord. But the coach is checking with them and saying, how is it going, and taking the log out of your own eye, and so on. Okay? They're not part of the conflict. They are objective and fair. They do listen, they pray, they counsel, they coach. But It's up to the individual involved, the offended party, to decide that they're actually going to the other one or not. We looked over the past few weeks at 4 of the boxes in particular on your quick start guide, stage 1. Analyze is one we spent a lot of time on. And this whole stage 1, all of these boxes together are the most important part of peace pursuit. Doing this well has everything to do with how well the resolution process will go. If both parties have done stage 1 well, there's a good 90% chance or better that they're going to conclude with godly reconciliation, that is, mutual confession and forgiveness as appropriate. This also is, stage 2 is when the 2 parties would meet, and again, we'll talk about that in a moment. But there are 4 other stages. Stage 3, as you can hear from Matthew 18, those of you who think about Matthew 18 approach to how to resolve a conflict, is when the 2 people draw somebody else in to help, okay? It can be a mediator, it can be something else, but in peace pursuit, it's, I think, usually a mediator. It's when you say, the 2 of us meeting together hasn't gone well, we need some help. Stage 4 is when even the mediation hasn't worked. And so you bring in a leader, someone with spiritual authority, to help determine what's going to happen. If that doesn't help with regard to an offender being able to confess sin that needs to be confessed, the leader may then say, let's take a pause, you need some help, and this is a loving, gracious step that peace pursuit takes from a lot of what just a godly approach to helping people. Like, what if you don't really think it's time to discipline somebody, which is where Matthew 18 goes, doesn't it? But what if it's not quite time, and you want to give someone time to work on a character issue or receive counsel, be mentored by somebody until they can see it. You want to give them a little time, if they'll agree to it. And so that's what stage 5 is, when an approved mentor starts meeting with an offender to help them work on something. If that doesn't work, and you get to the end, okay, stage 6 is when we would call it in the church discipline, peace pursuit calls it, a leader meets with the offender and pronounces some sort of decision on this, okay? So those are 6 stages. We're focusing on primarily on the first 2 because that's where the battles are. Well, we focused a lot on this analyze stage. We mentioned how important and how common understanding the mismatched expectations that both parties have of the other is, how important it is to see that. And we have this acronym, CLLR. Are my expectations or theirs, were they CLLR? What were those standing for? Clearly understood, legitimate, loving, reasonable. Okay? So, this thing that happened between me and another person, I feel offended by the other. What were my expectations of them? Were they clearly understood by the other person? Was it loving of me to expect it? Legitimate of me to expect it? Reasonable? If so, okay, now I have something that might be a real offense that isn't simply a misunderstanding. Now we biblically define it. That's what the analyze stage is about. We go and we say, what Bible words can we put to this offense so that we know we're talking about biblical sin? And once we know we're talking about biblical sin, then we can do these other 2 stages, that are not stages, steps of forgiving or confessing. If I now have gone through that, I know what the sin is, I know what to confess. If I've been offended and I've identified it, I know what to forgive. Okay? So this analyze step is very, very important. On confession, How many of you have experienced the reality that if I confess something, it engenders the other person confessing something? Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, yeah, I'm so sorry too. You know? That's what Lee Strobel is telling us. And I'm not talking about a shallow kind of, I'm sorry, without going deep. I'm just saying it really helps if somebody can initiate with humble confession. On the other side, regarding forgiveness, or rather withholding forgiveness, I can't remember if this is a different quote. You know, you're imprisoned by your own lack of forgiveness of another. It frees you up to forgive somebody. Maybe you've heard this quote about bitterness. Did I say it here? I don't remember. Bitterness being the poison somebody drinks in order that someone else will die. You know? We also looked at evaluate. We tend to think because there's a conflict, somebody's got to go to another person, but we last week saw that sometimes biblically you go, or sometimes biblically you forgive and overlook and don't go. Okay, so it can go either way, and that's what the evaluate step is about. Let's stop for a second and look at this back of this quick start guide, the second page in the middle. That's stage 2. That someone has decided now, yes, I have forgiven before the Lord the other person, and I've determined after prayer and searching my own heart that it's a loving thing to go to the other person for their good. I'm not seeking justice. I'm there for the other person's good. Jesus did the justice for us all, right? So why would I demand justice? If I want them to get justice, I get them to go to the cross, not to me. If you see what I mean. Would you answer this question? Somebody just look at that section of the page and say, who goes to whom in stage 2?
Well, I've heard it said that the spiritually stronger, the person who's more able to go, goes. That otherwise, there's no necessary order of who goes, right?
Well, what are the logical possibilities then?
The offender and the offended, if there's clarity about that.
Well, which of those two would go first? Or which one of those would go at all,
Well, the offender, I guess, would be the more...
The offender can go to the offended and say, and make a confession after the preparation of stage 1. But the offender could also understand, I've committed an offense. That's what the scripture says. If you're at the altar giving your gift, and remember, someone has something against you, i.e., I have offended them. Oh, I dropped that, I go. So the offender can go to the offended can go to the offender, or one other logical possibility we've talked about. That's right. The initiator can bring 2 others together. In all of those cases, the person going has already gone through stage 1.
In our ongoing problem in the church with Bill and Joshua, where Bill and his older friends are talking, and Bill is upset because Joshua, who runs the teen ministry to disadvantaged children, left the room in a terrible shape again. And they have this confrontation, which is public. As you remember, we put ourselves in Bill's place and put ourselves in Joshua's place, and we came to this decision that there was sin involved. And we came to a decision that the offender and the offended needed to talk. I think we got that far. And so this morning, just yourself, we're going to ask you to come up with a 1 or 2 sentence script. And you are Bill, all of you are Bill this morning, and all of you are Joshua this morning. And you are going to realize your role as offended. And you are going to go and talk to the other. You're going to prepare 2 sentences to start your conversation. You, Joshuas, are going to start the conversation with Bill. Bill, I realize that. And you're going to just sit for 2 minutes and come up with the first things that you would say as you go to Bill because he offended you. And you, Bill, have also been offended by Joshua. And so you're going to come up with your first 2 sentences. I've been wanting to talk to you since the last time we talked, which didn't go well, because your first 2 sentences that you want to bring to Joshua. So just in your seats now, in 2 minutes' time, come up with those first couple things that you would say. How would you start? You've been offended. You realize that there's sin involved. We also decided that it would be most loving to go to the other to help them to understand how they hurt you, how they wronged you, if you will. So how would you start that conversation? And you have less than 2 minutes now. So it doesn't matter to me who goes first. Do we have a brave Bill or Joshua who would start the conversation? How would you start the conversation?
As Joshua, I would say, Bill, you expressed an open anger, sinful anger against me about the events that occurred and not cleaning up the room.
Okay, you'd go to him and say what the sin was, an anger against me about sinful anger about not cleaning up the room. Any other Joshuas? How would you start in your going to Bill? We don't have very brave Joshuas.
Well, I would say that, start out by saying that I was really hurt that you brought it up in front of a group of other people instead of just with me by myself.
Okay.
And I admit to you that I responded poorly also.
Oh, very good. So you would say to him, it was in front of other people that you brought this up to me, and that really hurt me. And at the same time, I responded badly. So you've got the confession in there. You're going to him humbly. Yes. Any other things that Joshua might say to start the conversation?
Well, perhaps you would say that you value the relationship.
To start out by saying, I value this relationship.
Yeah, I don't want to remain with this conflict. I value our relationship. I really want to see us heal that relationship.
Yes, good. And express your desire that the relationship be healed because you value the relationship and you recognize that this is a problem. Okay, Joshua has started in going to Bill. How about Bill? How would you start in your conversation with Joshua, who offended you?
Joshua, I wanted to talk to you about our interaction last Sunday. You left painfully, and I was hoping we can pursue peace and resolution. I value your relationship. I was writing those very words. So I value our relationship, and I hope that we can pursue peace and resolution. Can we talk?
You want to ask him if he's willing to talk, and you're emphasizing that you value the relationship. And what was the very first thing that you said?
That I recognize that you left hurt or angry.
Good. You defined the time and what you saw happen.
I might also say, if I was on my game, I certainly did not intend to make you, to cross that.
Okay, you would announce your intention.
Yes, my intention was not to provoke you, but I'm hoping, I value our relationship, but I'm hoping that we can pursue peace.
Right, pursuing peace. You can put that right in there because that's what we're doing. Anyone else? How would you start the conversation? You're Bill.
I value our relationship, but also, I value what God is doing in my life and in the church. I don't want this disagreement that's between us to disrupt what God is doing through us.
Good. A recognition of what God is already doing in the church and that you each have a role in that. I haven't heard that you're offended yet when you go to Joshua. Yes?
Well, I would start by saying, Joshua, I realize that I
inappropriately.
Starting humbly, I spoke to you inappropriately right from the start.
And that I should have taken the opportunity to speak to you in private so that we can discuss our situation and ways of working towards a reconciliation.
Oh, good. So you start with, I was wrong in speaking to you in public and being humble about that. And you want to talk it through to come to a resolution. I still haven't quite heard how Bill was offended by Joshua in this.
The appropriate for us to voice for Bill. He's offended. That's important.
It is. It's not in the first two sentences, quite possibly, depending on how many sentences you're going to speak. But you are the offended, and you're going to him with the offense. Yes?
Well, I came in last week for the first time, so I don't know. I was thinking Bill started it. Is that correct? Is Joshua the leader?
Joshua's just walking up to get some coffee, talking to his friends. Yes.
Okay. That's the thing. I mean, Bill was the initiator of all this. And if I was Bill, and I knew, probably maybe I came from that room and I was
Angry, yes.
And
Bill starts angry.
I think I would approach Joshua and say, Joshua, first of all, I want to tell you that I am humbly sorry for the way I reacted to you in front of our community, church community. That was wrong of me to do that instead of coming to you privately. And obviously, we have some things that we need to work out. But I first just ask you to forgive me about how inappropriate it was for me to approach you.
Good. And you can come to him with that, right, that humble confession and asking for forgiveness.
I truly want us to resolve whatever conflicts that we're having now, because I respect you, I respect your ministry, and God and Jesus.
Good. Both parties are starting with the idea that they have been wrong in this.
The room's still a mess.
What's that?
The room's still a mess.
Well, the room might still be a
So
mess.
you want us to get into the details of confessing or addressing the issue, and you said first two sentences.
I did.
I would think in the first two sentences you want to win them over to be able to.
And I think you've all taken that to heart. At the same time, you have been offended, Bill. Joshua did what? We decided that he sinned in not respecting his agreement, not respecting you, and at some point in the conversation, maybe not the first two sentences, you will want to bring that to him. And that's a very difficult thing to do, which I think you're feeling. That's a very difficult thing to do. I just want to remind you that stage two, when the two come together, might happen a number of times. There might be a number of times when the two of you come together. The first time you come together, you say what you need to say. Maybe it goes well, maybe it doesn't quite go so well. You go back, talk to your coach, and then you try again. Stage two might come about multiple times.
30-second interruption. Okay, so we've seen there are really two things going on here. How to get through the initial contact about I'd like to have a conversation with you. Okay? And one way to do that, which I think we would strongly suggest, is to say, Bill or Joshua, I've been through this stage one preparation and I have found it really helpful. If you'd like to do that, I really think it could help our conversation. So if you'd like to take a week or whatever to go through that so we can talk about this, would that be okay? Something like that. And then get to this part, which is the actual stage two of how to bring up your sense of offense, or if you want to start with a confession, that really works well, if that's the first thing you say. So, and this felt a little like that toe in the water thing, I think, to all of us. And so I suggest that as part of the preparation for the actual meeting, you have a script. You've thought about this, you know what you're going to say, and you have something to remind you in the heat of the moment. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, exactly. And I think you're all feeling it. that if you've been offended, to bring it up to the other person is a difficult step, and that's why we want to go through that stage one and make sure we're right before the Lord. So let me just ask you a few questions. Ready? Why would you consider a peace pursuit? Why would you go into stage one and hope to pursue peace together?
I had this verse last week, and I did it because you were talking about a biblical reason
Yes?
to apply.
A biblical reason.
Philippians 2:3.
Philippians 2:3 says,
Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. In humility, consider yourself better. But in humility, consider others better than yourself. Each of you should look not only to your own interest, but also to the interest of others. But it's talking about Jesus who made himself nothing, taking the very nature and sort of being made in human likeness. All of that just tells me that when we know that we've offended somebody and we're looking at what they said to us, it's a pride issue.
it's pride. There is pride mixed in there.
And so to be a peacemaker, you have to let go of your pride and look to the interest of the other person.
Looking to the interest of the other person is what it's all about. You would go to them because you love them. You love them enough to bring this to them, to hope that they would receive it as from the Lord and that they would repent, they would be made different, etc. Yes?
Just one thought that you want it to have the mainstream of the church to be the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace, right? So that it's accorded with Galatians 5, which is love, joy, peace, patience. That should be the current of the church.
Yes, the church is meant to be just that. And the unity of the Spirit gets broken often. And yet we are part of being used by God to renew it. Wonderful. Wonderful. One more question, because we are towards the end here. Will you forgive? If you are the offended, will you forgive?
You laid this out. One of the things that I take away from today's conversation in particular is this idea of wire brushing, of scraping down to the real roots of the issue, intentionally, proactively, with discipline to get it all out. Because my tendency, and I think it's not uncommon, is to forgive without taking the wound and cleaning it, getting down to the
Absolutely.
flesh and letting it heal completely, right? So, and that leaves this sort of ambiguous tension or unresolved issues in your relationships that are, psychologically or even spiritually quite dangerous. And so, the thing that jumps out here is this idea of Bill being able to promptly, clearly, and lovingly explain how Joshua has sinned against him and what offense he has created in that. So this is a...
Yes, to define it as sin is actually to help your brother or your sister, because then they can ask to be forgiven. So the defining of it, the looking at it carefully. Okay, will you forgive? Yes, because the Lord forgave us. When? In this peace process. When will you forgive according to what we've been talking about in this peace process? Someone?
Right away. I think right away is ideal, but from the heart is the real. And
Right away, from the heart, before...
You don't demand them to forgive.
Before what?
Step 2.
Before stage 2, yes.
It's not conditional. You don't demand that they forgive.
Exactly.
Right, you can't demand that they forgive you, but you forgive them before you go to them. And you don't have to tell them that, you don't have to say those words, but in your heart, that's the preparation that you need, to know that you have already forgiven them and you are loving them by going to them.
Stage 1, you have forgiven them before the Lord. Everyone involved should be forgiving anything that's there before they go. When they get together, if the other person confesses, then yes, you can pronounce forgiveness and ought to do so. Okay, that was kind of quick. Really enjoyed being with you all. It is an expression of discipleship to follow this process well and do a little digging. I'll just blurt this and you can think about it. Relational conflict, where there is sin, sinful relational conflict, is an evidence that one party or the other or both have actually fallen out of alignment with the gospel of Jesus Christ, and his work on the cross. So it's never only about two people. It's always about, how have I abandoned you, Lord, in the middle of this as well. So often confession to the Lord about what's going on, because, Lord, who am I to despise the bride of Christ for whom you died, you know? So, thanks very much. We actually live in Cary, so feel free to let us know if we can be of further help. Thanks so much for being with us these weeks.
Tom, thank you for being with us. We really appreciate it. You did a great job. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so this morning we were reading a psalm together, and I just want to read the end of it. May the Lord give strength to his people. May the Lord bless his people with peace. In Jesus' name, amen. That was the end of Psalm 29. There's all good stuff in that psalm about the voice of the Lord accomplishing things. And then it ends up with strengthening his people and blessing them with peace. It was a wonderful psalm for today, for me. Okay. Oh, there's a book on this. There's a how-to book you can get with a website with a lot of materials. So go there too. There's good help there.